now that Citibank's there, I'm pretty sure they know that something's going to happen.
Welcome back to LukeTheTrader, and this time with Warren Irwin here. So could you please introduce yourself to the audience and talk a little bit about your background?
Hi, Luke. Thanks for having me on the show. I am the Chief Investment Officer and founder of Rosso Asset Management. We've been in business 26 years, so I think we're probably one of we're the oldest hedge fund in the resource space that I'm aware of. And we've got a very strong record, and that's why we're still in business. And most importantly, we're still in business because I've watched a lot of hedge funds throughout the years have a tough go of it. I've been in the business since 1986, so approaching 40 years. I've seen a lot of things, and many of you may have heard of some of the interesting stuff regarding BRIEX I've been involved in. I was pretty active in BRIEX back the early days of my career when I was more your age, and I learned a ton doing that. And just recently, I'm not sure if you know, Luke, the BBC just put out a 9-part series, a podcast on BRIEX, and very, very fascinating for anybody who wants to listen to the story.
So how have you been able to stay this long in the business? Like in this sense, sort of, how are you able to choose your future winners in a market that is arguably so cyclical and changes practically? One commodity is hot, the other one suddenly isn't, and then it's all inverted again, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that really helped me a lot in why I'm still in the business is that I learned so much trading BRIEX that the level of skepticism I developed and the amount of shady stuff I saw in the whole BRIEX fiasco, that it set a good foundation for me in the mining business. Like I remember when I first met the first guy, Dale Hendrick, he told me all these stories about why BRIEX was a fraud and all the fraudulent things they were doing. I couldn't believe it. Like I was in my early 30s. And it would sound like fantasy. It sounded like he was from outer space. And then I lived it for the next few years, and I go, wow. And then, that was, what, mid 90s, right? So we're talking, 30 years ago. And those lessons still serve me today. But I'll tell you, the scammers in the mining business, they're always coming up with new stuff. And it's fascinating to see the new scams they're coming up with, or new ways they want to steal money from me and for other investors. And it's fascinating. But the basics that I learned at BRIEX are very, very helpful. I'm really glad I learned them early in my career. And it's served me well in staying away from a lot of the scams, because that's really a good way to blow yourself up in this business.
So what would you say are sort of the basics in this space? Is it like looking at management? Is it just mineralization, or just having like a skepticism every time you look at things? Or like, what is it, the basics, so to speak, in your view?
Yeah, well, in general, people in the mining business are I would say the majority of them have a significant level of dishonesty. There are a core group, maybe sub 25%, that are just like you and me, straight up, honest, straightforward. Then there's another 25% that are semi-honest, and then there's a whole group that are just the shadiest people you've ever met. And and how do I find these people? There's there's all sorts of different ways of knowing it, but I find that shady people don't all of a sudden go honest, right? So if you've had a guy and you're looking at putting money into his company, he's been shady in the past, and he's got all of a sudden this news story is something else. It's rarely does that work, but occasionally I've seen shady people out of hit something good, and then that proves that rule of thumb totally wrong. But just keep your eyes open, and the issue you have too is, Luke, if you just go with the creme de la creme guys, like in the old days, like let's say Lucas Lundin or groups like that are just have a stellar track record, sometimes it's difficult to make money with them because everybody knows that, and so the price, your entry price is so high, it's tough to make money. So sometimes you kind of have to go into that little semi-shady group of people, or people with maybe not the experience, and and give some newcomers a shot, because you could sometimes get in real cheap. And if they make the big discovery, you could make a lot of money. For instance, when I got involved in, let's say, NextGen, early days, nobody knew management really, and it was kind of, I had to get to know management myself, and then you follow them and say, well, yeah, I'll give these guys a shot. I went to the site, did my work, and we were chatting just before this interview about premium nickel. Premium nickel, there's issues with management there. It's not an honesty issue. It's just a matter of their skill set, right? And sometimes you have to take a risk on their skill set, and then you get kicked in the teeth when they screw something up. But you know that over time they're eventually going to get it, right? So it's fascinating choosing management. But what Bre-X really helped me do, though, is it really just helped me understand that, wow, people aren't as honest as me out there, and there's a lot of shady people in the mining business. So keep your eyes open. That's for sure.
Since you already sort of started talking about premium nickel and sort of a little bit about the management side, what still keeps you confident in this story, even after arguably some hard times and some rather not so good financings, right?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, like my average cost on it, I would think it's probably about 130, 140 range. I got in super early in the stock several years ago, but then I've added at higher levels, right? And it's trading now at about 88, 90 cents. And the interesting thing, Luke, is not every stock I buy goes straight up. And so this one is one of those, unfortunately. But, I've been there before. Trust me. So why I like premium nickel is, I think it'd be a case study for any of your viewers here who want to learn about the mining business. It's a tremendous one to do your work on. And hey, just because I like it doesn't mean everybody else has to like it. But I'll just go through some of my thought process as to why I like it, and maybe from it you could glean, how I approach taking a look at a stock. So first of all, the reason I care about it a lot is because I have a very different perspective than almost everybody else in the market today. And the reason is I'm old as hell, right? So I was around, how old are you, Luke, right now?
Just 19. 19?
All right. Well, let's say how old was I? I was maybe, I was born in 64, so I'm 60 this year, but it would have been, let's say 1990, let's say 92, 93, right? So I would have been 28, 29 and I just graduated from MBA school, and I was working on the desk of doing proprietary trading for Deutsche Bank. And I was just starting out, didn't have a lot of money. And then I watched, I'm not saying complete idiots, but in a lot of ways they were, make like 10 million bucks back when $10 million was worth something. And they were, just regular guys who didn't really know a lot. And they got involved in diamond fields. Everybody hears about it. There's a book written by Jackie McNish about it. But Robert Friedland, again, this is an interesting one too. At the time, Robert Friedland had a pretty bad reputation because he was just coming off a big disaster with Galactic Resources. Then he makes this monster nickel discovery. And the amount of money I saw made was insane. So for my entire career, ever since the early 90s, I've been looking for the next monster nickel sulfide discovery. And I looked at Noront, but then I had some really smart people helping me there. And but I learned from Noront that Noront wasn't going to be big enough. We couldn't find additional pods to get above the tonnage. And I'm not sure where their tonnage is now, maybe 20 million tons, maybe less than 20 million tons. But I was looking for 100 million ton nickel sulfide discovery. And I didn't realize how tough it was to find them. So I've been looking for 30 years. And, like I said, I looked at Noront, I looked at some others, I looked at Sirius Resources. They were in Australia. Unfortunately, I got involved there a little bit too late. There wasn't much money to be made, but they had a couple $1 billion takeout, but they're going to be way smaller than premium nickel. And Voisey's Bay was taken out for, I think, 4.2 or 4.3 billion US dollars 30 years ago. Okay. So that's why I'm excited about premium nickel. I have a different perspective than everybody. I saw the money that was made with the nickel sulfide discovery. And like today, nobody was around 30 years ago to have firsthand experience and watching all their buddies make tons and tons of money. I had one friend who was kind of down and out, and at the time, and he went to work for Robert Friedland. He made $70 million on it, like $70 million 30 years ago. So, and he was a really good guy. Well, he was great. And, but so I saw, equity sales guys that were in the business. They'd make $10 million. Again, you could go into the most expensive area of Toronto and buy a really nice house for 800 grand or $1 million at the time, right? Just to give you a sense of how much $10 million was back then. So that's why I care about nickel sulfides. They're super duper rare. And what has changed since in the last 30 years is that, nickel laterites have always been around, but nickel laterites looks as if the Chinese have gone a long way to unlock it, and they're destroying the environment in the Philippines there isn't some in the Philippines, but mostly in Indonesia. They're destroying the environment there to get this nickel out, and the Chinese are taking all this nickel. But despite all that, nickel sulfide discoveries of any magnitude are extraordinarily rare. So that's the basis for why I care about nickel. And why do I particularly like nickel right now is I love nickel sulfide, not like nickel laterites, nickel sulfide. And, nickel's just been slammed down almost 50% since last year because of the threat of these nickel sulfides. Nickel laterites, sorry. So taking that into account, what's really cool is we're at the bottom, seems to be a bottom of the nickel price. And why do I like premium nickel? All right, well, let's take perhaps a top-down approach to why I like premium nickel. And it's in Africa, which is a hit or miss. So you got to make sure you have the right country. And Botswana and Namibia are the two top countries, in my opinion, in Africa to invest in. And it's in Botswana. Botswana has that's top down. Okay, all right. Now, good country, good, decent, honest people. Next step, do they have a mining culture? Botswana generates a monstrous amount of their revenue for taxes from, the Orapa and other diamond mines and other copper mines and other mines in their country. So they have a mining culture. And specifically with respect to premium nickel, they're right next to Francistown, which was a mining town, which provided workers to the previous mine that used to be on the property that they own. So, country's good, mining friendly, the locals, they've worked in mines, they know the benefit of mines, they want their kids and they want to have jobs at the mine and make some big money. So that's really good. And then you take a look at, their property. It's a former Salibe mine, or Salibe Pickway mine. And so it has significant amount of infrastructure, some vertical shafts already in place. And it went bankrupt, not because they ran out of ore, not because of other issues like that. They went bankrupt because their smelter went down and they couldn't get it restarted, and they ran out of money and they went bankrupt. So that means there's working shafts. I've been down the Salibe North Shaft myself to the underground workings, and there's still ore there. So what's cool about it, you've got the people there, supportive country, mining culture, fantastic climate. Like I remember looking at Voisey's Bay back in the day. Labrador, where it was found, is just a terrible, terrible place in terms of climate. And there's no infrastructure whatsoever, and it was an awful place. And the winter times are terrible. You go to Botswana, you walk around site, beautiful weather, absolutely pancake flat, tons of infrastructure, roads, rails, hydro, water, everything. So that's really good. Okay, so now what happened? Premium Nickel took over the old Salibe Pickway mine. They didn't take over any of the liabilities, so that's good. And so why do I care so much about this particular nickel situation versus others? Well, basically, my theory as to what's going on here, and I believe I'm absolutely right, is that you have the Salibe mine here and you have the Salibe North mine here, for instance. I'm not sure whether the original people found it, but basically the reason you have the 2 mines there is basically the ore body daylighted, right? So they say, so what happens is it reaches the surface, they do soil sampling, they go, hey, there's a discovery here. They sink a shaft, they start mining that. And they did this at both locations. But I don't think much thought went into, well, what is the structure of this? And my view on the structure is that they all join underground, right? In fact, I believe Salibe North join like this, and then Piquet, which is up here, will be like this. So I believe, in fact, I call it Nessie, or it's basically like a serpent. This deposit goes like this. Okay. So where are we
And
today?
this could be like sorry to interrupt you, and this could be like a 3 kilometer mineralization if it were to go from, Salibe North and the other part.
Yeah, yeah. So what they've done now is, and this has been, this previous mine that has been shut down has been working for decades, worked for decades before it shut down. So Salibe, the mining went down like this, and Salibe North, the mining went much steeper. And you're exactly right. There's a 3 kilometer gap between the two of them. And 3 kilometers is a long, long way. In fact, I drove one of my first trip to the site, and I've been to the site twice. I drove from Salibe North to the Salibe shaft, and it's what, 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers? Like, it's kilometers and kilometers. And we're going, wow, this is one monster deposit here. I mean, especially if you believe what I believe, that the two join up. And if the two join up, you've got 3 kilometers of strike length. And then people go, well, Warren, how do you know it has mineable grade? I go, come on, dummies. You're mining it from this end and you're mining it from this end. Of course you got mineable grade. So you've got the grade question and you've got the scale question answered. And they're saying, well, Warren, how do you know the nickel's there? Well, first of all, common sense would say, okay, one's going like this and one's going like this. And they're similar grade, and no, there's been no drilling in between. What do you think the odds of them joining are? Well, I've been in the mining business long enough to know they freaking join. Now, the next step is where I bring some unique knowledge to this, because I've been looking for nickel sulfides for 30 years. I have some level of familiarity with the most important geophysical tool in the world, in my opinion, looking for nickel sulfides, which is electromagnetics, or EM. And I've used EM to evaluate, for instance, when Noront made the Eagle discovery, I flew my own VTEM survey, which is airborne EM. And you get the airborne EM data. Then I hired the former head geophysicist from Falconbridge, which was one of the big miners in Sudbury, nickel sulfide guy. And he and I think one other geophysicist I had model it. And we modeled up the Eagle deposit as to what we thought was there. It's a very, very useful tool. When I was involved in FNX mining, they were using another EM tool called downhole EM. And what downhole EM is, basically you put an EM electromagnetic probe down the hole, and it will light up conductive material and electromagnetic material. So the good thing about nickel lights up like a Christmas tree with downhole EM. And in this instance, because the two are going like this, and it's the deepest part of the mine, which is well over a kilometer deep, probably between a kilometer and a half deep. Some people get freaked out about that. I don't. There's already shafts there, so that makes it a lot easier. They're drilling a lot of this from underground. So what you have here is you have this 3 kilometer section. You can't do it with airborne EM, so you have to use downhole EM. So there are a couple of drill holes historically drilled that these guys have been able to pop a downhole EM probe down there. And what do you know? It lights up just like my theory said it would. So what we have here, in my opinion, is downhole EM. And what they've done too, the important thing with watch and listen to the press releases from Premium Nickel. They're basically saying in a number of the releases that their downhole EM probes highly correlate to what they're finding. Certainly with Salibe North, you pop a downhole probe down there, and there's nickel ore here, drill it, there's nickel ore there. So the correlation between downhole EM probe information and finding nickel is very, very high. And And what's interesting about it, the CEO of Premium Nickel, Keith Morrison, he's a geophysical expert. So what's in the early days, or not even 6 months ago, he and I are sitting down together. We're going, Keith, I think it's just you and me that really understand what they have here. And he goes, yeah, Warren. He says, people don't get it. I say, yeah, well, I've been doing this. I've been looking at this from an investor for 30 years, and he's been looking at it from a geophysicist for all his career, which is many, many decades also. And we're just going, people don't get it. People don't see what we have here. It's just laid out perfectly. And the one thing too that it'll be important, and Keith will mention this too if you ask him, is one thing that could screw up downhole EM is other material like graphite, which will screw it up. It's graphite's in the background rock, but this background rock is super duper clean. So whenever you get an EM response, it's nickel sulfide. Then you go, well, the big risk in doing that in any other project would be, okay, you got nickel sulfides down there. It looks like a big anomaly, but what's the grade? Well, we know what the grades are because it's all part of the same system. You've got a barbell here. The grade's X here and it's Y there, and they're pretty similar. Well, what do you think you're going to have in the middle? Well, you're going to have the same grade. So what do we have? Well, we know we have a structure that's got economic grade in it, like 2% plus or minus. It depends what your cutoff grade is, but it's economic grade that was been mined for decades. So we have economic grade, 3 kilometers long. Now, what do we need to know? Well, we just need to know the footprint as to how big, how wide it is, and how thick this structure is. And the downhole EM work, you'll see it on their website and some of their cross sections. They're getting some pretty big EM plates. So the only way we're going to know exactly what the tonnage is going to be is by punching some holes down there. So what they've done just recently is they've raised about $27.5 million US. So they'll be using some of that to do some downhole drilling. I think initially they tried to from their existing workings, they're just going to do a drift out and then drill from underground. So it's way better to drill when you're from a kilometer down to hit targets at 1.2 kilometers, 1.3 kilometers down than it is to drill from the surface. But I think what happened is by the time you drill, you make the drift. I think last time, drifting depending could be between 6,000 and 10,000 a meter, right? Depending, and probably in Africa it's quite on the cheaper end. But you've got to drill like a 3 kilometer drift is quite expensive, and then you need to worry about ventilation. So then you'd have to have whether it be a parallel shaft or you need to do some raise boring to drill a hole to surface to make sure there's sufficient fresh air getting down there for the workers and for the drill crews, right? But so I think what they're initially going to do, which I don't think is a bad thing, is if you got 3 kilometers, what you want to do is you'll want to do and there's mineralization here. You step up 500 meters, punch a fence line of holes. And with modern drilling technology, there's 2 ways of doing that that are optimal. There's 3 ways actually. The simple way is just drilling straight holes, but it's expensive, takes forever. The other one is you drill a master hole and you wedge off it, so you're able to test this plate. And the one we used at NextGen extensively was directional drilling, and so that could be used also. So basically, what you're able to do is you're able to drill one drill hole down, let's say a kilometer, and then you're able to wedge or directionally drill off that. So you could really pierce the structure at 3 to 6 different locations, which gives you a tremendous amount of data, and certainly will give you a sense of the thickness of the plate, and in some extent, to the extent you drill with the width of the plate. So if you have the length is 3 kilometers, and once you do this drilling, you'll know how thick it is on average and how wide it is. So that's what I'm really, really looking forward to, because we could have many, many tens of millions of tons of nickel sulfide in a great mining jurisdiction. Oh yeah, and I didn't mention Premium Nickel also has the mining permit. So you're not waiting years for a permit. You're not doing environmental studies. This is a brownfield site. It's already been disturbed. It's already been mined. There's already mine buildings there. There's already paved roads there, parking lots, hydro lines, head frames. Everything's already there, which is another really, really sweet situation for this company. So if you wonder why I like it, those are some of the reasons. And what do I think the risks are if you do your work and you say, I think Warren's onto something here. I've done my work, and I think he's we've ticked all the boxes here. The one downside with having this amount of infrastructure is you've got additional overhead, right? So I don't know exactly what that overhead is, just running the mine. As in, if you've got a shaft, you've got takes electricity, it takes there's maintenance involved, there's workers need to do that. So there's an ongoing burn rate just to keep the infrastructure going that you typically wouldn't have in an exploration junior. For instance, at Voisey's Bay did not have that infrastructure cost. Of course, but you do know the benefits. The benefits are they have the infrastructure, right? So, and the mine permit. So there are some trade-offs. So these guys will be burning through more cash than a typical junior would to do the same work. And right now, in the market, people hate nickel and people hate mining generally, and so that money can be tricky to get. And but they've managed to recently raise a ton of money. I gave them a bit of money too, and so they've got their coffers are all filled up, and they're moving forward to prove that theory of mine. Before they prove my theory, whether it's correct or not, or our theory, because they have the same thought I do, we've got some drilling has already been done on Salibe North, and they're going to be doing a maiden resource estimate that's going to be coming out here before too long, which should give people who don't have the level of comfort I have with this type of deposit. They'll say X million tons of nickel grading, whatever, and they'll get a level of comfort. So more of the bigger institutions can gradually start moving into the stock. So it's pretty early days still. And then that's exciting. And also, too, anybody who's been following the stock knows that the U.S. government views the Salibe project as a strategic nickel mine globally. It's a strategically significant nickel situation because their geologists at U.S. Geological Survey have done the work. They have the parties involved at the U.S. government have the geos that have been to Salibe and understand the significance of this. So don't take my word for it. U.S. government loves this thing too. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the U.S. government in the next, let's say, 12 months, maybe sooner, maybe 2 years. Who knows? Who knows? It's tough to predict the U.S. government's ability to move. But I wouldn't be surprised if they made a strategic investment, whether that be debt or whatever, in order to keep this type of deposit within the sphere of the U.S. government rather than going to the Chinese. Because the Chinese would buy us out in like 2 seconds here if we wanted to sell to them. And but if the Chinese had a monster bid, hey, bring it on. I'll definitely take a look at it. But it is really these nickel sulfide deposits are very, very rare. And then the other thing too, I think, is I think there are significant enough, smart enough other big mining companies that know what we have here that they will. I think we'll get a strategic investor in at some point. And when you think about it, all this stuff, and last I looked, premium nickel still had a sub 200 million market cap, which is completely and totally laughable for anybody who has any experience or sense of history of how difficult nickel sulfides are to find, how rare they are, and how much they're worth on takeout. So we've pretty much got everything here. A tremendous deposit, tremendous country, lots of people who want to work for us, mine permits, U.S. government's on side, all this great stuff. And not only that, it's super cheap. There's a chance we can actually make some money. And so my thought here is, well, Warren, what do you think it's worth? It's worth billions. So here you are, you have an opportunity to buy sub 200 million market cap for something that is worth billions. Look at any of the precedent transactions out there in the nickel space. 30 years ago, Voisey's Bay got taken out at $4.3 billion US dollars. And we have a shot at having pretty big tonnage in comparison to Voisey's. It won't be the grade of Voisey's, but it'll be tonnage that could compare, in my belief, to Voisey's, but it'll take some time. As you know, we got to drill some deep holes. So here we are, up $200 million, steal of the century, in my opinion. And why is that? People, we don't have a resource estimate. People don't, not everybody believes me. And so it's exciting times. It'll be fun to watch. I've been through this before where I'm sticking my neck out. I remember, with Next Gen, I was sticking my neck out. I did the work. I had a model, and I said, there's 200 million pounds here. And, I remember at the time, a very well-known analyst on Bay Street had 35 million tons. So there's Warren at 200 million. The other guy's at 35. And I phoned the analyst up. I said, do you want to come over and sit down with me, and we'll go through my model. We'll go through, frame by frame, every cross section, and I'll give you all my assumptions, and I'll tell you why you're completely wrong at 35 million pounds. And he did not take me up on that. And sure enough, 3 months later, the main resource estimate came out, 200 million pounds. Well, no surprise to me, but surprise to a lot of people. So here we are. Here we are. We're just before their main resource estimate, and have I plotted every single hole for their maiden resource estimate? No, I haven't. Where do I think? I have a guess as to where it'll be. I think market expectations for the resource estimate are 15 to 20 million tons of nickel ore. So we'll see if they're able to deliver on that, or perhaps better it. The reason I'm not spending all my time worrying about the original maiden resource estimate that everybody else cares about, I'm looking for that 3 kilometer zone where there'll be tens and tens and tens of millions of tons of nickel ore.
Pretty much answered all my questions about premium nickel, the risks, and sort of talking about all of the projects. So let's just switch gears up a little bit and talk a little bit about the other important positions, one of which is Colonial. So could you perhaps mention a little bit something about the current state and how you see things going at the moment for people that are excited?
Okay. Yeah. One additional risk I wanted to add to what I think on the premium nickel is, I think that the CEO is strong technically, super honest guy, great with the government, everything else, but I think they need somebody like the head of IR to assist them with getting the story out, because I think especially once we get the main resource estimate out, I think the key thing there will be getting the story out. And right now, one of the risks is they don't have that person to get the story out. And Keith, he can only do so much he can't be on the road 24/7. He's running the company. So we need to find a strong corporate development IR guy to take the story forward and get the story out to people who don't know about it. So anyways, let's end that one. I knew you were going to get to Colonial Coal. Yeah. So I'm a big shareholder of Colonial Coal. I've owned it for like 7 or 8 years. And I got, do you want to hear how I got into it?
Yeah, sure.
So
I mean, it's always exciting to know.
Well, you've seen David. Well, you've interviewed David, right? So he's a crusty old guy, right? And like he might have been, when I first met him, he was slightly less crusty, but I must have been coming off a big win or something, because this guy was coming into my office, kind of crusty, disheveled, cranky, and for some reason I liked him, and I said, "All right, I'll give you some money." So I gave him a bunch of money. Back when the stock was like really in rough shape, it was around 15 cents, and I got a half warrant at 30. And I gave him way too much money. I gave him $2 million, which was quite a bit of money for a little 15-cent stock. But I must have been coming off a big win or something, and I was feeling kind of confident. So I took a punt on him, and I've got to know the guy over the past 7 years, and man, the guy is one of the smartest CEOs I know, and he is so smart when it comes to met coal, and anybody I know I think anybody who's ever talked to him knows that. And so I don't take my word for it, just talk to him. And what I love about him is he's like, you go to their offices in Vancouver, they're super cheap and crappy. Doesn't spend him on a lot of money on, obviously, doesn't spend him a lot of money on wardrobe He doesn't take a lot of money out of the company, which is awesome because he's running that thing on a shoestring budget. But man, does he ever deliver? He's got 700 million tons of high grade metallurgical coal, and it's in British Columbia. Again, British Columbia is all about met coal. Alberta is all about oil. BC is British Columbia is one of the key places to find metallurgical coal in the entire world, and we're in one of the two metallurgical coal camps. We're up at there's one down in Elk Valley, which Teck, now Glencore, owns, and then we've got a big position up in the one in the north, which is Tumbler Ridge. So I've watched David, working with people trying to get, obviously what he wants to do is crystallize the gain and sell it. Stock's trading now probably around the 260, 270 range. So it's been a good winner for me. And so he's got this tremendous, and he's got this tremendous property, and he's trying to find buyers for it. So he's been working on that for probably aggressively here for at least 5 to 7 years. And, just as soon as you think you're getting close, like, COVID happens, or our prime minister pisses off the Indians when we're talking to the Indians, or he pisses off the Chinese, and the Chinese kidnap a couple Canadians, and then there's China. Don't talk to the Chinese for 2 years, and the Indians are accused of assassinating somebody here in Canada who's a Khalistani separatist or whatever, and they probably did kill the guy, but in my opinion. But anyway, so there's been some road bumps along the way, right? So been a fascinating story to watch. But man, David is one seriously sharp character, and he actually built a number of the mines. I think the majority of the mines up in that region he actually built, and he sold out to the Nemi sold out to Anglo, and then Western Canadian Coal sold out to who ended up buying them? Was that Walter Energy? I forget who. Yeah. Yeah. So he's built and sold coal mines in the region. He's a good guy. He's a likable guy. So I think the First Nations know he's a good, decent, honest guy. He treats them with respect, treats them fairly, wants to make sure they get looked after in any deal that's done. So he knows what it takes to permit and build a mine, deal with the First Nations, all that sort of stuff. So here we are today. What's exciting about Colonial Coal today? What's exciting about it is I was getting kind of bored there with David, grinding it out on his own. What's really interesting, and this is, I think, a game changer, and I think other investors would agree, is having Citibank join the party. So this is another funny one. Like, not only is this is an old crusty old guy, but the board members. He's got the former head of Coal India Limited, the largest coal company in the world, just happens to be on our crappy little company's board. And then you look at who's going to be our banker? Well, Citibank approaches us. Well, we're still a little junior, and we've got Citibank as bankers. We've got the former head of Coal India on our board, and we've got David's very experienced himself, and he's got some other pretty serious players. And the former head of investor relations for Teck on the board too, Greg Waller, yeah. And so he's punching above his weight class in a serious way. And so what's fascinating, I think, about Citibank here is that I think just in speaking with David from time to time, I think he's actually quite happy to have Citibank out there, because I think they're closers, right? They're in there to get a deal done. And I think all the buyers have been sitting in the sidelines going, okay, well, we'll wait for the opportunity to move, and they're maybe not moving quite as fast. Now that Citibank's there, I'm pretty sure they know that something's going to happen, and the deal, if there is a deal to be done, it will be done. And they're taking it much more seriously now that there's a U.S. bulge bracket firm representing Colonial, and I'm really excited to see what they're able to accomplish. So